Helping sellers get financed on the next page. Identified mortgage brokers and bankers, send them to them, get them pre-qualified. Help arrange the loan several months before the option date. Follow up with these people. If they have a 1-year lease option, about 6 months into it, give them a call and say, have you qualified for a loan yet? You would like them to get done. Go ahead and get qualified. 5 talks about carrying back small seconds behind good first. If you sold a house on a lease option to somebody and they could qualify for a 30-year 4% loan, would you be willing to carry back a $10,000 second behind that? Let's say you sold a house for $200,000 and somebody was able to go out and get an 80% loan, $200,000. So they got a $160,000 first loan, 4%, 30 years. Payment's about $900 a month. Would you be willing to carry back a $10,000 second behind that? And why is everybody nodding their head? Why? What's the worst thing that can happen? Worst thing that can happen, they get behind in their payments and you take over that loan. Okay, and now you've bought an equity, a $40,000 equity for $10,000 subject to a 4% 30-year loan. Not a bad strategy maybe, if you've got the extra $10,000. Okay. Avoid carrying behind high interest rate first. So if it was an 18% first, probably not such a good idea. The 4%, real good. Look for Roth type investors to sell to. Who has a Roth that would like to buy that $10,000 second for $5,000? Well, now we got a whole bunch of people that used to be in the back row raising their hand. That's good. Taking another equity as down payment. Sometimes the buyer will own another house they need to sell and you accept their equity as option consideration. I gave an example about that this morning when we talked about buying on their lease options, but it works both ways. If you have found a house that you can buy at a good price, and then maybe you've lease optioned it, a higher priced house, take the smaller house in on down payment and keep the smaller priced house. Relieves them of payments, gives you a profit opportunity. So a good idea. 7, dealing with issues that arise after they take possession. Unknown defects. Probably, if you're going to say what's the biggest risk of selling somebody a house using a lease option, the biggest risk is they get to move into it. They get to live there for a year. If they live there for a year, they're going to hear all the squeaks, they're going to know all about all the leaks, they're going to know about the bugs and everything else that live in that house. So if you know there's a problem, disclose it going in. If you know this house has something wrong with it, tell them about it and write it down so they can't come back and say, you didn't tell us it's got a bad roof, or you didn't tell us the air conditioner's on its last legs. Write that stuff down. If you sell a house to somebody with a bad air conditioner or a bad roof, that deal's going to go bad. You're going to have to fix all that stuff. So you're just kidding yourself if you sell one like that, because when they go to finance it, they're going to have to replace all that, aren't they? So use common sense. Don't think you can pass off a bad house to somebody, because it's just not going to work. But if you do notice some defect, disclose it going in up front. That makes them feel better, actually, because now they know about it, and it won't come back to bite you as much. Major repairs that the buyers cannot afford to pay for. The biggest thing we've had go wrong is a roof. We sold a house that got to a guy with a lease option, and the roof started leaking, and the roof looked good to me, but it started leaking, so it wasn't good once it started leaking. And so the guy called me up and he said, I can't afford to put the roof on. I said, can you afford to put half the roof on? Because we can put half a roof on to start with, but half the roof cost $4,000 at the time. He said, no. I said, what can you afford? He said, $2,000. So I said, okay, you put up $2,000, I'll put up the rest, and if you buy the house, we'll add the rest to the price of the house. So if I have to put up $6,000, we'll just increase the price of your house by $6,000. No interest. Is that a good deal for me? It's not a bad deal for me, because I'm going to have to pay for this roof one way or the other, it looks like. And if I can increase the price of the house by the cash I've got into the deal, and he actually buys the house at the end of the year, that's a better deal for me. Then the alternatives are not fixing a roof. Well, you can't do that. You got to fix the roof, okay? And if he won't pay for any of it, then we got a problem. So increase the price. Don't be greedy about trying to increase 200% of the price like we talked about on the other side. Remember the 200% deal? That's on the other side when you're buying, not on this side when you're selling. So you just want to try to recover your money if you can, especially something like a roof or an air conditioner, which adds some value to the house, but not 100 cents on the dollar to the house. They change their minds. That happens a lot. And I had one lady gave me $7,000 down a number of years back, and she showed up about 6 weeks later and said, I've decided to move to South Carolina. Well, people do that, right? So she wanted her $7,000 back. I said, well, you know, when we wrote it down, we wrote down that you got $2,500 back if you didn't buy the house. She said, no, I want my $7,000 back. So I said, how about $5,000? And she said, okay. So we split the difference and she went to South Carolina. But it did cost me something for her to move in, move back out again. I got to sell it to somebody else again now. So it was only fair that she paid something, but I had enough to negotiate. But people do change their minds. People are people. Extending the contract if they cannot close. I'm going to show you our contract in a second here. But generally we build into the contract an extension clause. Say if you want to extend, the price goes up by, and I put in a percentage, and the rent goes up, and we put in a percentage. And today I put in 5% on both of them just to see if they'd say yes, because it's about right now. But in a slow market, I put in 2%. I'll put in a smaller number. It depends a little bit on where you start on your price. You know, if you're way high on your price, if you sell a house for $280 and a year later it appraises at $270, how much do you get? $270. Yeah, you can't sell the house to somebody who will get a bank loan for more than what it'll appraise for. So you can reach a little bit, but then you end up compromising a little bit, and just you don't let your ego get in the way here. If you knew it was worth between $250 and $275, and you sold it for $280, and it came back at $270 a year, take the $270 and run. You know, don't think you got to hang on to that $280 price. It was just a reach. Next page: negotiating checklist when selling with lease options. Set your price at a realistic retail price and stick with it. Don't be way high. Be retail. Don't be way high. And see. Well, I found in selling that if I don't get a bunch of showings in the first 10 days, I'm doing something wrong. Either the price is too high, house doesn't look right, something's wrong. So the first 10 days should tell you if you've got things priced right. And if you're not getting any interest at all in 10 days, lower your price a little bit. You know, drop it $5,000, see if something happens. Number two, if you never want to see this house again, ask for a little bit larger down payment. So the house you don't mind getting back, you might sell for $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 down. The house you don't want to get back, maybe ask for $7,500 down to give the person buying a better chance of qualifying for a loan. And you maybe pick about who you sell to as far as credit goes and income goes, and make sure that they look like they're going to qualify for it in a year. And it also says give a larger monthly credit. Now, if you're going to give a larger monthly credit, unless that rent is higher than market rent, a lender won't count that monthly credit. So you don't do yourself any good by offering somebody a $500 monthly credit to purchase, because the lenders aren't going to count that. They're going to look at what the retail rent was, what these people were paying, and only the difference will they count. If you don't care when the sale closes, ask for a smaller down payment and give a $100 a month credit. Okay? If you think you're in an increasing market and you want to hold on to the house for another year or two, go with that technique. 4, don't allow a buyer to do work to the house unless they have the skills and resources to complete the work. So if the people are talented, you know, if you're selling to a general contractor or a plumber or somebody who knows what they're doing, then you can let them do work. But it's pretty funny about how things work out. I had a house that I sold to a plumber one time. I went over and looked at it a year later. He hadn't fixed anything. All the plumbing was still leaking or non-functional. I said, you know, you think your wife would have chewed on you a little bit by now, because you do know how to do this. But just because people know how to do it doesn't mean they're going to do it. So I would suggest to you that if a house needs a lot of work, if it has a non-functional kitchen or bathroom or something, tell them they have to fix that before they move into the house. You know, give them a deadline. Make them fix it sometime soon. But I've had people do some remarkable stuff. I had one house that was in really bad shape, and I rented to some people with a lease with an option, a 6-month lease with an option, gave them a real short fuse, and they went in there and they didn't move in. They worked on it for about 3 months, but they put it in really good shape. You know, they fixed it all up. They were able to refinance it within 6 months and pay me off, so it was a real happy ending. But that was, I think, the exception rather than the rule. These were people that were really motivated to do that, and they're still in that house. They write me letters yet. They love that house. Try to get them to take possession and begin and pay rent as soon as possible. So if somebody's in my office and wants to buy a house on a lease option, I want them to move in today. You know, no reason to wait for 2 or 3 weeks. Let's take possession right now. As soon as I get the money from them, I want them to take possession. Use a 1-year term as your standard. If they want an extension, increase the price and rent for the extension period. Build in a refundable security deposit. Much better to agree on that amount today than negotiate it later. Okay? And you want to separate your security deposit from your option deposit, not only internally, but you want them to know about that too, because that's one more thing that works in your favor. If they ever said, we made this big deposit, you can show the judge, well, actually, it was $5,000 they paid me, $3,000 with the option, $2,000 was security deposit. And that works in your favor. It shows that they made a smaller deposit altogether. So on page 53, and it says option to purchase agreement, but if you read the caption above it, it says option contract to use when selling on a lease option. When selling. Now this is designed to be used with a lease or a rental contract, so this is not the rental contract itself. This is the option contract. So let's look at this. First paragraph, it said, for good valuable consideration, we got the buyer's name, has the option to buy the property, and it has an address, and it has the price in there. Okay? Now, look around and see if you find the legal description anyplace. Okay? Nobody found a legal description? I must have left that out. Look around and see if you can find the owner's name anyplace. Left that out too. Well, two oversights right there. Now, without a legal description and without the owner's name, even if they recorded this, would it cloud the title? Probably not. Now, you do see my company name down there, Florida Coast Realty Sarasota, Inc., but that's not the owner. That's my company name, okay? That's who's collecting the rent and has the security deposit. And actually, that's just the notice address on that one, okay? So we start off by kind of a big picture. We're not going to have the owner or legal description on here, so if they somehow record things, and they shouldn't be able to record this because it has no notary signature, okay? They shouldn't be able to record it, but if they did record it, probably wouldn't cloud the title. We don't want it recorded. We don't want to cloud our own title. We know we're honest. We know we're going to perform. We don't know that about them, so we want to make sure that we keep all the marbles on our side for a while. The $5,000 deposit will apply in full to the purchase price. Okay, but if you drop right on down to paragraph 5, it says, should the tenants not purchase the property, $1,500 of the above deposit will be considered a security deposit. As per the attached rental contract, all other money paid is non-refundable. Paragraph 2 talks about their credit they get each month. It says $100 each month. The monthly payment received on time will apply to the purchase price for the first 12 months. Remember I said something earlier about the taxes and insurance after the first 12 months? Well, the same thing happens with this credit. Credit's only for the first 12 months, so they get no credit the second year if they extend. The term of the agreement is 1 year, running concurrently with the attached rental agreement, and all the terms of the rental agreement must be complied with in order for this option to be valid. Well, the terms of the rental agreement say you've got to take care of the house and you've got to pay on time. Okay, so if they don't pay on time, their option is no good. Now, as a practical matter, if somebody paid late a couple times and they still wanted to buy the house, am I going to sell them the house? Sure, I'm going to sell them the house. And that's where people get in front of a judge, is where they trip somebody up on a very small technicality, or somebody paid late one time and then they want to buy the house. They said, nope, you paid late one time, the house went up 10 grand, you can't buy it. That's when the judge is going to get involved. That's where you get in trouble. So, just be a good business person. If they paid late one time, technically they're in violation. You can still sell to them if you want to. Be a good guy. Number 4, in the event the purchaser wishes to exercise the option, they must give written notice to owner at least 60 days before the expiration of the agreement. Why do I want 60 days notice that they're going to close on this house? Well, just in case I want to do a 1031 exchange. If I know I have $200,000 coming in on this house and I want to do an exchange, if you study the exchange side of it, we're not going to do that in this class, but you only have 45 days to identify the next property. That goes by pretty darn fast. This gives me 60 more days to identify that property. So now instead of 45 days, I've got another 2 months. I've got 3.5 months. I can probably find a house in 3.5 months if I go working for it. And it shows who we want them to deliver that notice to. And if the tenants don't purchase the property, they get $1,500 back, security deposit. 6, if there's no real estate commissions paid as a result of the transaction. That's a big deal. Now, if I'm going to pay somebody a commission, I'll do it with a side agreement. I won't change this. And the buyers will be responsible for all closing costs other than the dock stamps on the deed. The buyers will be responsible for all closing costs. That says a lot, doesn't it? That little line's worth a couple bucks. And you want them to be. Now, you can renegotiate anything you want, but that's a good place to start. Taxes and insurance will be prorated as of the date of closing. You can change that if you want to. You could say the taxes and insurance will be prorated as of the date of this contract. So that's an item that is negotiable. This is what I normally do. I give them that first year, and I pay the taxes. 7 is important. It says any changes tenants wish to make to the property other than painting the interior must be approved by the owner in writing. So I don't want them to do a lot of stuff to this house. I tell them, save up your money so you can close on this house. Don't put new carpet down. Don't paint the house. Don't spend thousands of dollars doing that kind of work and not be able to close. Save up enough money to close. If you've got lots of extra money, I don't care if you improve it, but it's smart for you to buy this house first, then fix it up. So no additions requiring a building permit may be made during the term of this agreement. Why don't you want them to do that? They can screw it up. You can pull a building permit, not finish the job, not close it out, not have the inspections. They can do all sorts of trouble. So you don't want them to do any major construction. That's the deal.
What's worse than that is when they don't pull permits.
Well, you're right. But if they pull a permit, that doesn't mean they're going to do the job. That just means they're thinking about doing the job. But you don't want them to do major work, and you just tell them that. It doesn't always work, but I've only had 1 or 2 cases in all the years that somebody started a project and then didn't buy the house, and I got it halfway done. Let's go to the next page, number 8. This is an important paragraph. It says they can have the house inspected now, when they move in. Okay, they can have it inspected for pests. They get to walk through the house, look at anything they want, but after they've inspected it, if pests move in later, they're theirs, right? Because in Florida especially, a lot of bugs will move in right after the people move in. And those are not my bugs. Those are their bugs. 9 says the property is being sold in as-is condition and the buyers acknowledge they've inspected the property and accept it in its current condition and the tenants are responsible for all repairs to the property during the term of this agreement. The last sentence in that paragraph would be one you wouldn't want to use if you're really concerned about whether or not these people are going to be construed as buyers. Because when you make somebody responsible for all the maintenance on the property, it looks like they're buyers, doesn't it? It looks like they're owners. So I'm just throwing that out as a caution. I'm not going to change it. It has never caused me any trouble. I want them to be responsible for the maintenance. If they can't do the maintenance, I want to talk to them about it, because maybe I'll do the maintenance and we'll raise the price. But I'm going to leave it in my agreement, but it's just a caution for you. Paragraph 10, the agreement may be extended for 1 additional year in the following terms. The rent will increase 4% each year the agreement is extended, but it says just 1 year, so it's just going to go up one time. And the purchase price will increase 3% each year that the agreement is extended. So you can have that go for more than 1 year if you want to, but I'd say 1 year at a time is all you want to do. You don't want this to look like a long-term contract. You want it to be a short-term contract. Paragraph 11 just talks about rate on gas, paragraph required by law. Paragraph 12 says that at closing, the sellers agree to deliver marketable title free and clear of all encumbrances. So if they pay me cash for this house, I'm going to give them a free and clear house. In the event sellers cannot deliver good title by that date, the buyers have the option to cancel this contract and to receive a return of all option money paid by them, therefore releasing the sellers from all liability, or to extend the contract at the same rent plus any increases in taxes and insurance until the sellers can deliver good title. So if for some reason we can't deliver good title, they can extend for a year. They can choose. They can get their option money back. Everybody will be happy. I'll give them all their option money back. So they gave me $5,000 down. I'll give them the whole $5,000 back if I can't deliver good title. I think that's fair. They paid rent for the year, but they've enjoyed the house for the year. So that's a wash. That's fair. If they want to stay in the house, they can stay in the house, but we're going to increase the price by taxes and insurance costs until we can deliver good title, because it may take us a while. Now, give me an example of where I might not have good title to a house that I've sold on a lease option.
Took a mortgage out on it?
Well, if I took a mortgage out on it and they're paying me off, I can pay that mortgage off, right? But my problem is I can't get good title from the people I'm buying from, so I can't get them good title. If I had good title to start with, it wouldn't be a big problem. But have you ever bought a house and you haven't received good title from the sellers yet? What would that look like? That would look like this morning. What did we talk about all morning? Buying on lease options. If I bought a house on a lease option, do I have good title? No, I don't. And if I buy a house on a lease option, can I sell it to somebody else on a lease option? The answer is yes. Can I give the new people good title? Well, not until I get good title, right? And what happens is these deals fall apart sometimes. And you can't get good title from these folks over here. Well, you want to have a paragraph in your agreement that says, if I have any kind of title issues that I can't solve, and purchase contracts have this paragraph in it, don't they? You ever read a purchase contract? They say if you can't deliver good title, something happens. They generally give the seller more time to get good title, to clear the title up. And that's what we're saying here. We're just writing down specifically what will happen if I can't deliver good title. You've got two choices. You can get your money back, leave, everybody's happy. You can stay in as a renter, close when I can deliver good title. And if that it's not going to take the rest of my life. It might take a year or so, but we'll get it done. When we get it done, we'll be able to deliver good title to you. But I'm just saying, deal with it up front. If you don't deal with it up front and you have a problem, then you have a conversation with too many people involved.
What happens to the $100 a month they were paying extra?
Extra for the first year, that counts. For the first year, it still counts.
You'd get that back?
No, I wouldn't get the credit back. I get a $5,000 deposit back. The option money is what I give back, not the credit. That's what it says. 13 says we've all read it, we understand it. The agreement is not to be recorded. The buyers are encouraged to seek the counsel of an attorney if they do not fully understand any part of this agreement. And we sign it, and that's the whole thing. You're looking at the whole thing. There's no other witness signs. There's no notary seal lines. That's the whole contract. And I've sold a lot of houses just using those 2 pages, plus my rental contract. Yes, ma'am.
What would be the maximum number of years that you would extend the lease option?
I would do it 1 year at a time for a long time, probably. And I don't know what the maximum is. I don't know. But if somebody is not going to be able to buy a house in 2 or 3 years, they're probably never going to be able to buy that house. So I'm thinking someplace in that range. I don't see this going 5 or 10 years. It's starting to look way too much like a contract for sale now, or a long-term purchase. So a couple years. But it's not etched in stone. Depends on you. It just depends on the circumstances sometimes. Sometimes people do have problems, and I'm happy to help them work through those problems if I can figure out how to do it. Yes, sir.
It says here, this agreement is not to be recorded. It seems like that'd be a red flag. Has anybody mentioned that and why it would not be recorded?
Nope, only you. People buying a house from me with a low down payment, and this is a house they like. This is not somebody being forced to live someplace. These people have seen this house, they like this house, they want to buy this house. I'm selling it to them with a low down payment, with low monthly payments at a fair price. They are happy.
The unsophisticated person would not even know to record it anyway.
Yeah.
So I'd just leave that out. But I'm curious, what would you say if they did say, why do you want this?
Well, there's no reason to leave it out. There's a reason you don't want it recorded. There really is. The reason you don't want to record it is you don't want it to cloud your title somehow, because then you don't have to go to a suit to quiet title to extinguish their rights, which is going to cost you thousands of dollars. Okay, so there's a good legal reason. You ask any lawyer, they're going to say that's a good idea. But you want them to understand the paperwork. You want them to understand it. And you want them to initial pages. You want them to sign the bottom. If you make any kind of changes, make sure they initial it, because you want them to understand this deal. If there's a husband and wife, I insist on both of them being in the room, not just one of them. I want both of them to understand it. And if there's kids, I kind of like to see the kids too. When I rent houses to people, I insist on seeing the kids. If you leave your kids at home, I say, well, go home and get them, bring them down here. I like to see them. I like to meet the kids, because you can tell a lot about a family about how the kids behave.
Do you go over it line by line with them?
I do.
Okay.
I am not in a hurry. I set aside time. When I rent a house to somebody and I do a lease option, I'll set aside an hour. Now, I rarely take an hour, but I'll take half hour, 45 minutes sometimes. And if they have questions, just like in here, I want to answer those questions as clearly as I can, but I want them to understand it. You'll see on page 57 a short form lease. This is not a lease I use very often, but this is for using when buying with lease options. And you can do better than this, but I just threw it in the book so you have something to look at. But if you're going to buy a property, you want to make sure you write down the terms of the lease. So in here it kind of gives you a very short lease. When you're buying, you want a short lease or a long lease? How many people want short? You both get what you want. I don't care. But generally, short is better when you're buying. Okay, longer is better when you're selling, because what is a lease? It's a whole list of rules typically you have to comply with, right? So the less it says as a buyer, from a buyer standpoint, the less it says, probably the better off you are. If it says John can pay $1,000 a month for the next 90 months, sign here. That's pretty good with me. I don't need a whole bunch of things that I have to do and that you have to do. Because if I'm buying a lease option, who's responsible for stuff? Me. Yeah, the option is going to say a lot more, but if I'm buying a lease option, the lease is going to make me responsible for pretty much everything. We're on page 33 talking about selling on lease options. Somebody asked me a question at a break I want to talk about just for a second. They said, now, when you buy on a lease option and sell on a lease option, isn't that fairly risky? And the answer is, yeah, that's pretty exciting stuff. And I've seen it done, but I've seen it done and have it go bad too. Now, I don't do that. I don't buy on lease options and sell on lease options. I mean, I'm not saying that I wouldn't do that, but I rarely do anything like that. I had a guy show up at my office one time who had sold a house on a lease option at a nice profit, about a $50,000 profit. Of course, when you sell a house on a lease option, what do we say is a major disadvantage? They move in and they find things wrong with it. So this guy moved in and he found things wrong with it. And he came back to the guy with a list of things that were wrong with the house. He said, you need to fix these things or we're not going to buy the house. And so he sold it to somebody who's pretty smart. So he thinks about that, and of course that's going to eat into his profit. And now the guy he bought it from, it gets together with the guy he sold it to, and they decide to cut this guy out of the deal. You see how that would happen? Okay, the guy who he bought it from still owns the house, right? And he drives by the house a lot, and he sees a new guy in there, so they get to know each other, and if they would just get rid of this guy. Well, the guy in the middle does have a contract that says that he can buy it within a certain period of time for a certain amount of money, and it's a good contract. So he came to me and showed me the contract. I said, well, the problem you have is a little short-term cash flow problem, because the guy who's you're not buying from is going to keep dragging his feet, and pretty soon your contract with him is going to expire because the guy that you're selling to is not going to close. He's just going to hold you up. He's going to say, let's go to court, let's talk about it for a while. So you can see how it can get exciting. If you bought it on a 3-year lease option and sold it on a 2-year lease option, and the guy on the 2-year lease option keeps dragging his feet and doesn't close, you don't have any money to close your first deal. So you just get squeezed out of the deal. Well, we were able to salvage that by closing. We bought his position and closed on the first one, and then told the guy who had the repairs and all that stuff that he could still buy it, and we renegotiated that end of the deal, and it worked out for everybody. But it's pretty exciting if you buy on a lease option and then sell on a lease option, because you don't have solid control on either side. What I've been talking about recently here in the last couple hours was selling properties that we'd owned as investments for long periods of time on lease options. So we owned them, have good title to them, we know we can deliver title. But occasionally, I'm going to show you a couple examples here, we've been involved in deals where we are still trying to clear the title up. And generally, when you're trying to clear the title up, you're in a fight with either somebody who has a judgment against the house that you're trying to settle, or maybe a mortgage holder who you don't agree with on how much money is owed to them, or a mortgage holder who's just non-responsive. Any mortgage holders go out of business in the last downturn? So if you have a bank that went broke and now somebody else has a mortgage, you have a hard time sometimes making a deal with that person. So that messes up your title. So if you've got sold on a lease option, but you can't deliver good title because you can't make a deal with a mortgage holder, or you don't want to make the deal. You want to do a short sale, or you want to do some kind of renegotiation and they won't do it quite yet. You want to have enough time to make that negotiation and make that deal, so you make most of your profit by discounting that mortgage holder. So the idea of buying on lease options and selling on lease options, it's possible to do that, but it's pretty exciting to do that. And if you're going to do that, you want to really have your act together. That would not be your first deal. That is not the beginner course. You want to do that after you really know how to sell and that you can sell, and really know how to buy and that you can buy, and make sure that you've got a good deal going. Okay, on page 33 then, selling on lease options, case study 1. Typical retail sale of a house in good condition. When I sell houses, I typically put them in pretty good shape. Now, that doesn't mean new kitchens, new bathrooms, new air conditioners, new windows, but it means clean and not scary. You know, you don't want to sell a house that has bad looking trim and looks like termites are eating it up, or the roof is leaking, or things that scare people off. Because as I said, when they go to qualify for a loan, you're going to have to fix that stuff anyway. So you might as well fix it going in and give them a sound house, maybe not cosmetically perfect, but a sound house. So this house is in good condition. It was worth between $2 and $225, market rent 15 to 16. We ran an ad that says $6,000 moves you in, 322, 225, $1,500 a month. So the top end of the retail price, the low side on the rent price, and the down payment's about 2% of the value, and there are no closing costs at the time you sign the lease option. All it takes to move in is $6,000. The term $6,000 moves you in, I think, is a pretty good sales pitch, because people know what it's going to cost them to move in. And even with rentals anymore, you know, our typical rental is about $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 a month. Some of them up over $2,000 a month now. And our security deposit is $3,000 or $4,000 on some of them. So it costs $6,000 to move into some of my rentals now. And so we put that in the ad. $6,000 moves you in. It's amazing how expensive things are getting. I don't advertise a $100 a month credit. And if they don't buy, I write into my agreement that I'll refund, as we talked about, $2,000 of their $6,000. And we list that as security deposit under our rental contract. If they ask for concessions, rather than lowering your price or your rent, increase the credit if you want to. Now, if somebody's a marginal borrower, that's not going to do them any good. But if they have good credit and they're only going to get an 80% loan, the banks won't care, and it will do them some good. Case study 2, sale of a house that needs repairs. You own a house in rough condition you want to sell. Anybody have one of those? Okay, nobody in the back row raised their hand that time. Rather than spending tens of thousands of dollars to repair the house and then trying to sell it, you advertise it with a lease option and sell with a low down payment, because nearly anything the buyers will do to the house will improve it. This house was in bad shape and it needed somebody who could fix it up. And you want to be careful. As I said before, you want to make sure that when you sell a house like this, it's to somebody who has both the financial wherewithal and the aptitude to go after a project like this, because otherwise they won't fix it up to get it financed. It has to be fixed up so that the bank will lend money against it occasionally, or eventually. Market value 180 to 200. Neighboring houses are worth 2 to 250. So we sold it at a bargain price, $200,000, which is kind of the low side of what it would be worth if it was fixed up. $1,200 a month, but a first month free. Now, I've given people as much as 3 months free on some of these houses that needed a lot of work, that needed new drywall, new cabinets, new ceilings, new everything. And some of them need that kind of work because they've been abandoned. You ever seen houses like this that the banks have just let run downhill for a year or two? They need just a ton of work. If you get your hands on one of those, you can sell them, but you have to sell them to people who can do the work. And I say here at the bottom, don't let them move in until they make the needed repairs. Do not let somebody move into a house that the county's going to kick them back out of because it's not habitable. So make sure they do the work first and then move in.
Is there anything how do you get that in writing, or how do you enforce them not actually moving in?
It's hard. It's a challenge because sometimes people move in anyway, but that you need to at least talk about it and try to have that understanding before they move in. But I've had one guy move into a house that was pretty rough, and he remodeled the whole thing right around him. He was sleeping in one of the bedrooms and did all the work in the rest of them. So it did work. He was a single guy. He was a contractor. So he had a couple things going for him. But normally that's a bad situation when somebody's living there because they just take too long. And this guy, in that particular day, it took a year to do it. It took him a year to fix that house up because he was working too and doing this at night. And that's a typical deal. So you have to use a little common sense to make sure it's probably going to work. I use that same percentage. I kind of guess, okay, what are the chances of this person being successful in this particular deal? And the chances are only 1 out of 10, I'm not going to do it. I want somebody to have at least a 50-50 chance of success because I don't want it to have an unhappy ending. Somebody fixes a house up, puts all that energy into it, and then can't buy it, they're going to be unhappy. And you don't want an unhappy ending. But you can sell a house. I've done the math. If I take and fix a house up that needs a new kitchen, that needs all new drywall, needs all new paint, new carpet, what's that going to cost me? thousands of dollars, right? Tens of thousands of dollars, $20,000 or $30,000 easy, and it's all out of pocket. I mean, there's no real discounts to getting that work done. I can't get it done at a wholesale price. I'll be paying guys maybe a fair deal, but it's not going to be like half price or anything. We'll be paying retail for the materials and retail for the labor. So that's $30,000 out the window. How long will it take? Can I do that in a month? I love guys, you can see these home improvement shows where they fix a house up and they do it in like 2 weeks, it only costs $6,000. They put a new kitchen, 2 new bathrooms in. I said, really? How do you do that again? Only on television. How long does it take to put a new kitchen in, and new flooring, and new paint, and new drywall? Oh, we're talking months and months? You're talking about different contractors. And they get these guys coordinated and get them to do all this work, the plumbers, electrician, and drywall guys. I mean, it takes a long time. So it's going to cost you several months of rent, if you're lucky, just a couple, plus $20,000 or $30,000 out of pocket. And now you've got a house what's the house going to look like? It's going to look good, right? It's got new carpet, new paint, new cabinets, everything looks good, smells good. If you go to sell that house, what type of down payment do you want? Big. You don't want anybody to move in that house and tear it up. You just fix it all up, right? That's a problem. That's a problem. So now you're looking for somebody with 10 grand down, and you've eliminated a lot of your market because not many people have that much cash down that want to buy that house in that neighborhood. So you've kind of created a problem for yourself. You're better off maybe making the house safe, as I said before. You get taking care of the stuff that makes it non-functional, make it safe, but let them do some of the work on the inside so you can sell it for $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 or $6,000 down. Because if somebody puts their own carpet down and puts their own paint down, they're going to take better care of it, aren't they? Okay? So the structural stuff I typically take care of, let them do the paint, carpet, cosmetic type stuff, cabinets and all that kind of stuff, and that works out better. So you want them to take care of it. Case study 3, selling an expensive, fragile house. Sometimes you find a house that's in really good shape that you can buy cheap. We bought a foreclosure, and the guy was funny because he pulled out all the appliances, and I'm talking about he pulled out the hood vent and the dishwasher and the stove and the refrigerator, but the house was perfect. I mean, it had all granite countertops. It was gorgeous on the inside. He just took the appliances with him. So we bought the house at foreclosure, and I called him up and I said, "You still have the appliances?" And he said, "Who is this?" And I said, "Well, I just bought your house over on the street." He said, "How do you get my name?" I said, "Well, it's in the public record. You used to own the house." "How do you get my phone number?" I said, "You're in a phone book." He wasn't the brightest bulb in the box. I said, "Do you still have the appliances? I'll buy them back from you. I'll pay you cash, because they all fit. I got all the hole and plug them back in." He says, "Yeah." I said, "Well, give me a price." He gave me the retail price. I said, "No, I can buy new ones for that. Yours are 5 years old. You took them out." So he still has them, I'm sure, in his garage. Pretty funny guy. But we bought that house. It was in really good shape. We put all new appliances back in because everything else in the house was brand new. And then we sold it. And when you sell a house like that, that's in really good shape, now you've got to charge more money. So you're not probably going to get top dollar retail. And you're looking for a different type of customer. You're looking for a customer who has credit or almost has credit, maybe saving up a down payment, but maybe they've got a house they're trying to sell someplace else. It's a different situation than somebody just getting started in the housing business and this is their first house. So as I said before, if you find somebody else who has a house that they'll give you for a down payment on this house, that's a good way to do some business. Or if they've got a house they're going to sell. I had a guy buy a house like this and he was moving down from Atlanta. And he had a house for sale in Atlanta. He had a lot of equity in it. It was like a $200,000 house, a $100,000 loan. So what I did is I said, "I'll tell you what you can do. You can give me a $25,000 note against your house in Atlanta as a down payment on this house. I'm talking about a little bit of cash. And you can pay me that $25,000 note when you sell your house up there." So he did that. That got him in a house down here right now. And he could afford to make the payments, and he had his house listed up there, and he finally sold that and paid me the $25,000. So now we had $25,000 down on a lease option, 1-year deal, and he couldn't really qualify to close on his house until he did what? Sold his house in Atlanta. He couldn't afford 2 mortgage payments, but once he sold the house in Atlanta, then he could afford to close on this one. So it all made sense. So that whole story went together. So you look for situations where you can kind of custom design a deal that'll solve a problem for somebody. And his problem was he wanted this house. His wife wanted this house. He was on the cell phone with me, and I could overhear his wife saying, "I love this house." I said, "Perfect." At that point, I knew we were going to make a deal. But it was a gorgeous house. It was a good house, good neighborhood, everything smelled good, looked good, so it worked out well for both of us. Okay, so you can be a little flexible. You can kind of custom make these deals, and if somebody has something else they have to sell first, maybe you can figure out either take it on a down payment or take a note against it that you'll get paid when they sell it. Okay, number 4, selling a house you don't have clear title to. So here we talked right on point to the buying on lease option and selling on lease option. If you've contracted to buy a house on lease option, you want to sell that same house. Your purchase terms are $160,000, $4,000 down, $1,400 a month, and you advertise $5,000 moves you in. You sell it on a 1-year lease option for $199,000. So you paid $160,000, you're selling it for $199,000. That looks like really good business, doesn't it? You're making $35,000 plus a little bit. On a fairly simple deal with a very low down payment. The problem is you want to make sure, or here's the way you have to be careful when you structure it. You want to make sure that when you're buying, you have a lot more time to buy it than you give the person you're selling to close on it. So if you can buy it with a 60-month lease option and sell it on a 1-year lease option, that seems pretty safe, doesn't it? Okay, so now the guy on the 1-year lease option doesn't close, so you sell it to somebody else on a 1-year lease option. Still feeling pretty good about this deal. They don't close, you sell it to somebody else on a lease option. Well, now you're 3 to 4 years in on it, starting to get scary, isn't it? At this point, you want to have plan B. And what could plan B be? Well, you could just sell it outright. Or how could you, let's solve the other side of it. You've got a 5-year lease option and you're 4 years into it. How do you solve that side of it? Bring an investor in to buy it. Or close it and put your own loan on it. Okay, so but don't walk away from that deal. Don't lose a deal that you're going to make $40,000 or $50,000 or $60,000 on. Think through plan A and then have a plan B. Somebody lined up that'll take title to it, that'll close on the original option, and then maybe you'll sublet it to you on a lease option and let you lease it to these people. So you can save deals like that. Now we had another deal that was similar to that. Let's see if I've got it in the book. No, we'll talk about it here on page 4. Similar to this, where we had a house that we'd bought, and we couldn't get good title because the lender wouldn't negotiate with us. And we knew the lender would negotiate with us eventually, but we were trying to pay the lender off at a discount, and they wouldn't take our money. So we just wanted to wait them out. Well, if we forced the deal, if we wrote them a check for the full pound of the mortgage, we weren't going to make much money. But by waiting them out, they eventually came back to us and they took a significant discount on their loan because there was no payments being made on this loan. We bought the house subject to a loan that was two years in default. 2 years in default. And we call them up and say, this loan hadn't had a payment made in 2 years. We'd like to talk to you about, what we could do. And they said, we can't talk to you. I said, really? So that means we can't make payments to you? No, we can't accept your payments. I said, okay. So at that point, we started thinking about plan B. And plan B, well, let's sell this house on a lease option. We'll put a nice disclaimer in there that says, if we can't deliver clear title to you, we'll either give you your money back or we'll extend the contract, just like we said earlier. And it went on for a while. We couldn't deliver clear title to them, not because we didn't own the house, but because we took title subject to this loan, and they wouldn't take our money. So, and you may think that's funny, but I think that happens a lot. I think these lenders just go comatose on a regular basis, and they can't find the file or they won't look for the file, and they won't settle. I mean, they will not accept a payoff. They won't accept payments. So, they want to foreclose, but they really can't because at the foreclosure, you can show up with the money and pay them off. I mean, so you have plan B. So when you sell a house where you don't have clear title, do that. Just build a language in that we talked about in the class here that says if we can't deliver good title, we'll give you your money back, okay? Or you can stay in the house and continue to pay rent, pay the taxes and insurance until we can deliver you good title. Both ways work for me. Page 37, taking another house in as option consideration. You own a high-price house in good condition, which doesn't make sense as a rental. You don't have a lot of lookers because it's a high-priced house. Somebody comes along and wants to buy this house, but they haven't sold their house yet. So you advertise or you tell people when they walk in the door that you would accept another house as a down payment. And if it's a more expensive house, it's what we call a move-up house. People moving into this house aren't coming out of an apartment building or a duplex. They already own a house someplace. They need to sell their house before they can buy this one. You can make a lot of money, just like the car dealers make a lot of money, by accepting trade-ins. You think car dealers do a pretty good job making money with those trade-ins, make a little profit on the trade-ins sometimes? Well, if you'll take a house in as a down payment as a trade-in, even if you give them a retail price on their trade-in, sometimes the dealers make you feel good by giving you a retail price, but what don't they do? They don't discount their price way down. So you end up paying a fairly retail price for their car. Well, in the house business, retail is even bigger, isn't it? More zeros in the house business there are in the, don't take that the wrong way now, than there are in the car business. See, you'll get it tomorrow. You'll get it.
I think there's more zeros in the car business.
Well, that could be. That could be. So if we have a house that's worth $375,000 and we pay $275,000 for, and we can market it at $375,000, we could take somebody's $200,000 house in on as a down payment, even if it was only worth $180,000, couldn't we? We could give them $20,000 too much because we've got a $100,000 profit here. And that looks like a lot like trading your Yugo in on a Cadillac. That's about the spread, you know. But they're happy to take your Yugo, give you full price. Not even sure there are Yugos anymore, but there used to be. And there's a nice profit to be made by all. So if you get stuck with it, or if you find an opportunity in a big house, you can option the big house. You can option without using a lease. And believe it or not, I know this is going to shock some of you, but I have actually a full day course on just options. Are you shocked? So if you want to look at a different way of approaching some of these situations without the lease, without taking possession, just an option, you could do that with a big house like this that you never even want to go in possession because you don't want to be responsible for the house at all, and then turn around and resell it. Next page, lease option checklist when selling. Number one, use a simple agreement that the buyers will sign now. You don't want to make it complicated. You have somebody in your office or across the table from you at Denny's or someplace that wants to buy a house. You want to be able to make a deal right now, so keep the language simple, make it big, make it easy for them to sign, and you can make a deal the first time. Number two, disclaim any flaws in the property. If you know there's something wrong with it, if it's got a drainage issue or something that you just know they're going to find out about, or maybe they won't find out about, but you know about, it's your obligation to disclose that. And if you don't disclose it, it'll come back and bite you at some point. Yes, sir?
You mean disclose or disclaim? Disclaim.
Well, I probably should say disclose would be a better word there, wouldn't I? It was probably, disclose is what that should say. Thank you. Disclaim is a different word, isn't it?
Yeah, it means something else.
Yeah, it does. And my word processor probably corrected my spelling there, or I typed that in the middle of the night. Disclose. Thank you very much. Number two should say disclose any flaws in the property. We will fix that in the book. Number three, sell it in as-is condition. As-is condition. So you want them to do a full inspection and give them some time to do this. I give them a full day, go over and bring your friends over, walk around. It's generally your parents or in-laws show up and walk around and they point out things that are wrong with the house. And sometimes it's funny to watch. Sometimes they're trying to sell the house to them because maybe they want them to move out of their house. You never know what the motivation is, but you get both sides of it. And sometimes you get somebody who's real picky. But if you'll walk around with them and they find something wrong, you can say, well, we could fix that. If it's something small or something that needs to be fixed anyway. And it depends on the deal, but make sure they inspect it, and then you want them to take it in as-is condition, because something else does break. It doesn't mean they're going to fix it, but what does it mean? It means you're going to talk about it. So if something else breaks and you've got to put a new sewer line in and it costs a couple $1,000s, you want to be able to come back to them and say, look, neither one of us knew this was going to happen, but because it's happened and it has to be fixed, we'll put in the sewer line for $2,000, but we're going to add the $2,000 to the price of the house. Otherwise, we won't fix the sewer line. Your choice. And so it's not like there's a lot of decisions here, but that way you get your money back. You get your money back. So you want them to take responsibility for the house, and anything you spend on the house after they do that gets added to the price of the house. Make it clear that the option money is either not refundable or is only partial refundable. Make sure your language is clear on that. And if you're going to apply part of it to the security deposit, be very clear on that. And I strongly recommend that you do that, because it'll eliminate a lot of conversation if they don't buy. Giving them back part of the money if they don't buy, just what we just talked about, the security deposit. If you enter into a subsequent contract, watch out for a couple things. In a subsequent contract, what I'm talking about here is you sold a house to somebody on a lease option. and they call you up and they say, we want to go FHA, or we want to go VA. You know, we have a way to borrow some money, so we want to convert this contract to one of their contracts. Well, here's a couple of things you want to be careful of. Number one, you want to make sure that if they've given you $5,000 and your deal is they don't get the $5,000 back if they don't buy, that so much of it is security deposit, that's reflected in this new contract, because most new sales contracts are going to say what? $5,000 subject to them getting a new loan. And they get the money back if they don't get the new loan. So just make sure that you have a clear understanding, you write it down so there's not a fight over that down the road. And number two here, B, liability for repairs. If they sign a contract with FHA or VA, they may come back and require the seller to do some repairs. Okay? And if they do that, again, you need to see if this is a good business deal for you. But unless they, if they come back and say you need a new roof, you might be able to negotiate an increase in the price if you put a new roof on. Okay, so if it's appraised at $200, maybe you can get the appraisal up at $206 with a new roof on and get some or all your money back. But be aware of those two issues, because they do pop up when you sell on a different type of contract. Avoid paying taxes twice on rent or down payment. If you take a $5,000 option down payment, how does it show up on your closing statement? You close on the house, right? Got a HUD form? Where does it show up? Does it show up on that statement? Yeah, that shows up as part of the price, doesn't it? So will the IRS want you to pay taxes on that money? All right. So if you've already reported it, or you have already collected it a couple years gone by, and your options expired and you've already reported this income, you could end up reporting that same money twice. Be careful of that. Report it just once. You're not obligated to report it twice. 8 talks about assigning your option to a third party. There's a lot of interesting stuff about assigning options. Some people claim you can't assign an option. I've never had a problem with it. I look at it as a contract, so I think you can assign most contracts unless it specifically says you can't assign them. But it's not bad if you're going to assign to your corporation, if you know you're going to make an assignment of this contract, then put language in your contract that allows you to do that, just to make sure you don't have a problem. And then getting paid at closing. Some people will assign their contract. For example, let's say I have an option to buy a house, and I assign it to Gary, and he's going to now close on his option to buy the house. I will never actually go into title. If I don't go into title, is that good for me? In some ways, going into title is not necessarily a positive thing, but I want to get paid. So if I sign my contract to Gary, how do I get paid? Well, we talked about something earlier today. We talked about the idea of a mortgage and recording a mortgage and getting paid on that mortgage. So if you have a mortgage on this property, you could list that and get paid, or you can show that it's a title flaw, and you can tell the closing agent, be it the attorney or the title company, that you have a claim against the title, which you do because you have a contract to buy it, and to buy out your contract and wipe out your rights, so you're willing to sign a release or a quitclaim deed, whatever they want to eliminate your rights in this property, you want a payment of a certain amount. And whatever that is, whatever you've negotiated, if it's $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000, that's the amount you get paid at closing. So they're going to want an estoppel letter from you, just like they would want from a lender, showing that you are due that much money at the closing. Using lease options to structure transactions on page 39. I mentioned earlier that one of the benefits of separating the lease and the option is that you can separate the income from it, the income received from the option part, which would be the capital gain. So here's an example where mom had $150,000 in cash, sitting in the bank, earning how much? Not enough. Not enough. Son finds a house and he says, Mom, we've got a $200,000 house we can buy for $150,000 cash. Would that be a good deal in your town today? Yeah, I think it's a pretty good deal. Market, you're buying it with all cash. Nothing wrong with those numbers. And the only problem is Mom's got all the money, son has no money, and he makes her this deal. You put up the $150,000, I'll pay you $1,000 a month. What kind of return does she get on her money? She get $150,000 at $12,000 a year. 8%. 8%. Is that better than she's ever going to get at a bank? Ever, right? I mean, even during the days where they were paying 5% on savings accounts, they never got to 8. So that's a terrific deal for her. So what have we done? We've disproportionately funded mom with a little bit of cash flow. Okay? What's the son's interest? Well, the son may make a little cash flow off of here, but the son's major interest is down the road. He wants an option to buy it at the 150. So 10 years down the road, when it's worth maybe 250, it's worth 200 today, so let's assume it goes up a little bit, he's got a $100,000 profit. Now, if the son is the only heir, what would be the clever thing to do? Not exercise the option and inherit the property, because then he get a stepped up basis. Okay? So then if it's worth $250 today, he inherited it, he wouldn't pay any taxes when he sold it. Now, even if he had a couple siblings, he could make a deal with mom, make sure you write this down, that he got this house, they got something else. Otherwise, you'd have a little battle over Thanksgiving dinner, I think. But by splitting it up this way, we haven't formed a partnership, have we? We haven't formed a limited liability company or a corporation. We've used a lease option contract that says mom's going to buy the house, own it free and clear, going to lease it to her son for $1,000 a month net, but forever, long time, rest of her life, 20 years if it needs to be, because 8% is close enough. That's all she really needs. And then he gets all the appreciation. Well, that's a great way to structure something in it. And you can do it with a lease option, very simple paperwork. And if I was going to do that and there were siblings involved, I would notarize it and have it witnessed. I would make sure I have a document that if somebody questioned it, it's the real deal. And probably have mom write a letter saying, thank you for letting me in on this great deal. Because it's such a great deal, I'm going to rent it to you at this price for the rest of my life. And you get all the profit. That's why you have an option to buy it for $150,000. I mean, I would document this, ask me why I am so interested in all that. No, don't ask me. Don't ask me. Okay. So, an easy way to separate those two things. Next page, buying an investor out of his portfolio. Somebody was asking me at the break, how would you find an investor who had a portfolio? And I said, well, I would identify a neighborhood where I wanted to buy houses. Take any neighborhood that's got 500 houses. And then I would take the time to look at the records in that neighborhood and see if I couldn't identify somebody who owned a number of houses in that neighborhood. Okay? And you could probably pay somebody to do this if you didn't want to do the labor yourself. I mean, there's people that manage mailing lists and have all sorts of databases that have everybody's addresses. I mean, the guys who do political campaigns can sort it just about any way you want, figure out who lives there and how many of them register to vote, how many are homesteaded. So what you'd be looking for is non-homesteaded properties in that neighborhood. So if you could print out a list of non-homesteaded properties in a certain neighborhood, say there's 500 houses in there, I'll bet you maybe a fourth of them are non-homesteaded. Then you look down that list. You're only looking at 125 names now and see if you can't find 2 or 3 of the same names. And now what you found is somebody who owns 2 or 3 houses in that neighborhood. Now you look them up, see how old they are. If they're old, go try to buy their houses. I mean, if they're over 40, go get them. I got one guy to smile. One guy, just for the record. But logically, and think about where we are kind of in a big cycle of things right now. People, somebody told me the investor's prayer, oh Lord, let us have one more good cycle, right? This is it for some people. This is the good cycle for some people. I mean, prices have recovered now. Rents are up. If you're going to sell, if you're at the point in life where you want to sell, this is not a bad time, is it? Things have recovered a little bit. So there are people that have been in the business for a long time, have seen a lot of cycles, are now saying, hey, it's a pretty good time to sell. And if you can find those folks, the lease option offers so many advantages over other ways to buy their property. You should make these type of offers. You should sit down and really understand this concept and make an offer to them where they don't have to transfer title now, so there's very little risk to them. I mean, because they're going to own the deed. They will not be signing anything that encumbers that deed. Your option doesn't really affect that deed in any way. So they own the deed, they own the property, they can refinance it if they need to, they can leave it to their kids if they want to. It would just be subject to their option to you. and you would have a lease. You would have the management responsibilities. So it's an excellent way to solve that problem, to pass things down to a younger investor. I know there's some young people in here who are getting going and tearing it up. It's a good partnership. So down at the bottom, I show you a sort of suggested way to structure something like this. You could start off by, these are houses that have a market rent of $1,200 a month. $12,000 for the 10 houses. You could rent them from him at $900 a month. That should give you an immediate cash flow of a couple $100 a month if you do all the work with an increase, build in an increase, so he gets a little bit more money each year, 3% increase, whatever you can negotiate. And then structure a buyout. If a guy had 10 houses, he probably wouldn't want to sell all 10 of them the first year, would he? May not want to sell all 10 of them in any year. So you could structure a deal that after 5 years, they could buy them at different prices. And most investors, if I've got a deal, if this is my deal, and I've got an option to wait for the fourth 5-year period, 20 years down the road, if I can wait that long, when am I likely to exercise my options? Close to the end, right? Close to the end. If I have an option to buy something, and even at an increasing price, I'm watching the market, but let's say these houses that have gone, that started off at about $200,000, go up to $300,000, $350,000, $400,000, I'm going to wait to the last possible year to buy these houses, which is probably good for everybody. Now, if the guy who's selling wants his money sooner, what's he going to do?
Reduce the price.
Well, he might call me up and say, buy one, or he could borrow some money. If he borrows money, what kind of taxes does he pay? Nothing. Nothing. Can you borrow money once you get old? Anybody had that thought? The answer is yes. I was sitting in a bank with a guy, and I won't tell you his name, but he's in his 80s, and he just borrowed $1 million. That's a lot of money. He's 80-something years old. Okay, so the banks will still lend money to folks who have, yeah, he's optimistic, the bank's optimistic too, will still make loans. And wouldn't it be better for this guy to borrow $1 million than to sell a bunch of houses? Sure it would, because he takes that money out tax-free, and then it'll get paid back over time, because eventually these houses will get liquidated. Now, if you have a bunch of kids, you might look at it a little bit differently. Page 41, Roth IRA option investor. If you don't have a Roth, you should. If you can't qualify for a Roth, your kids should have a Roth. If they can't qualify for a Roth, your parent should have a Roth. Somebody in your family should have a Roth IRA, because on a regular basis, you'll find opportunities to put together deals where a Roth can fund it and benefit from a nice profit. And what's the major advantage of the Roth? No taxes. No taxes. And that's a tremendous advantage. And if you haven't figured that out, you will figure it out someday. Because when you start paying taxes, you're going to say, boy, I wish I paid more attention to that no tax part, you know, where I could accumulate $1 million and take it out tax-free. Major benefit to you. So managers are often looking for cash flow. Isn't that true? People that manage properties looking for more cash flow. So Ace Management owns a house and needs $10,000, and it calls John, who has a Roth IRA, and agrees, and then the IRA agrees to pay $10,000 for an option to buy half interest in the house at a price below today's market value. Remember earlier today we had a little show of hands of who would buy part interest in an option on a house, and we had a number of people raise their hands who would be interested in doing that. Well, I'd be interested in doing that. Here's a house that's fair market value at $200,000. The Roth has an option to buy half interest for $80,000, $10,000 to apply toward the price for 20 years. What kind of return is a Roth likely to make on an investment like that? 10%? 20%? More or less? What kind of leverage does a Roth have when it buys an option to buy half interest in a property for $10,000? Have a lot of leverage? A lot of leverage. When you have a lot of leverage, what typically happens to your rate of return?
Go sky high.
It goes high. So if the house goes up, the rates of return are going to be very high. What's the downside risk? What's the downside risk to the Roth? How much can they lose? $10,000. And that's important. That's important. So if you can spread that risk out, and you know, we can make this deal better, we can make it $1,000. But there should be a way to defend deals like this from a business standpoint. The numbers should make some kind of sense so that if you ever got looked at, and if you're very, very successful, somebody's probably going to come look at it. They're going to say, how'd you do that? You know, if you started off with $10,000 in your Roth and you made it grow to $5 million, there's a good chance they're going to come just out of curiosity. You know, not that you did anything wrong. They want to, okay, how again? Could you tell me how you did that? I'd like to try that myself. So if you're going to make deals like this that have very high rates of return, that's a very good strategy. But just make sure you can argue the business side of them. Why did Ace sell that? Well, because they needed $10,000 that day to pay some bills or something. There was a logic behind that. And these numbers seem way out of line to you? They're not way out of line, are they? Where people get in trouble in their Roth is when they buy something that's worth $600,000 and they buy it for 50 cents. You know, it's just so out of line that there's no way you can come up with a story that makes sense. You just can't do it. You can't do it without laughing, right? So the numbers have to make some kind of sense. Now, if this house happens to be a real good deal and that $10,000 does turn into $100,000 or $200,000 in 10 years, that's okay. But at least when it started, you had a story you could defend. Everybody with me? Yeah. Okay. So start off with a good story, and then if this house gets to be very valuable and sells for $1 million one day, it could just be a remarkable deal. And sometimes you get lucky. That's okay. Well, it does. It does. But I'm saying, and you agree with me, I think, the story's got to make some kind of sense going in. So you just can't, and some people call me up all the time and say, well, what if I buy an option with $100 from my Roth, 10 years to buy, you know, a $200,000 house for $100,000? Said, who would do that? Who would sell you a 10-year option for $100? Only your mother, you know? So you can't defend that. It's got to make some kind of business sense in case they catch you. You should just assume that you're going to be successful one day, right? The whole idea is to make a lot of money one day. So if you wake up with a whole bunch of money, you've got to be able to fill in some of the blanks if they come see it. Now, not on every deal, but on the deals in your Roth IRA. This is the important thing, because the Roth IRA is going to get looked at by, you know, there's going to be a very high audit frequency eventually, because people have a lot of fun in these IRA accounts and they do things that sometimes they shouldn't do. So a lot of people are going to get looked at, and they're going to find some people that have lots of money in there and they're going to take a bunch of it away from them. So just be conservative. Family joint ventures on page 42. Mom and dad have acquired a portfolio of rentals. Now their children are interested in acquiring property for themselves. Mom and dad sell, there'll be taxes to pay. Mom and dad sell, they'll have income, they'll have cash they'll put in the bank, and what will happen to their income? It'll go way down. It'll go way down. So if you're a real estate investor and you own a portfolio of houses, you don't want to trade that portfolio of houses for cash in the bank. That doesn't make any sense at all. You want to continue to have the income coming in. So they have 8 free and clear houses, and they have 4 children. And they agreed to lease each child 2 houses for 90% of the gross rents they produce. This percentage of the gross rents is the important part of this little example. Why does that make it safer for the children?
They don't have to pay when it's empty.
They don't have to pay when it's empty. Okay? If they're not really good managers, you know, if they're clever, they could rent it kind of on the cheap side to somebody who would take good care of it and not have much management, but they wouldn't have as much income. But it'd be a safe deal to make with the child, wouldn't it? Because you can't screw it up. I mean, you can do a poor job of managing, which means you wouldn't make much money and the parents wouldn't get much money. But in any case, you're not going to get in a position where you're totally in default and you lose the property. And in consideration of leases, they'll receive an option to buy their house for the next 20 years, but not before 10 years. One thing you can do with an option is you can have a start and a stop time. This one doesn't start for 10 years. You can't accumulate these properties, acquire these properties for the first 10 years, but after the 10 years you can buy them until the 20th year at 100% of today's appraised value at the time the option is exercised. So not at a wholesale price, at a high price. But what do the kids get in the meantime?
Cash flow.
Cash flow, management experience. Okay, wouldn't you like your kids to be more involved in the business if you have kids? It'd be a way to get the kids involved in a safe way, and then eventually, if they're smart, just like in our previous example, they won't exercise the option, what will they do? They'll inherit the property. And when they inherit the property, somebody's going to tear up all those options. And if you don't exercise the option, it's no big deal. No big deal. Parents still own it. Properties flow through their estate to the kids. Kids get the stepped up basis. Everybody gets beat out of the taxes. So the only people unhappy are the government, which is okay. Benefits to the parents, a reduction in management responsibilities. That sounds like a lovely thing. Without a large reduction in income and a trouble-free sale at a high net price. Now, if one of the kids couldn't make this work, what could you do? You could redistribute, right? You could let one of the other kids have an extra house and somehow still split up the estate. The kids could still be in line to inherit their share of the estates. Benefits to children, some income today plus management-free tutoring. A lot of advice with that money, plus a chance of significant profit in the future. And down at the bottom you see, I put a little line in here, options can always be renegotiated. Now that's something people don't think about too much, but options run a certain term, but at the end of that time, be it 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, by mutual agreement, they could be extended, couldn't they? They could be extended. Whether or not there's compensation to extend it, that's up to you and your kids, how you're going to do that. But you can either tear the option up, you can extend the option, you could sell the option to somebody else, but because the way this setup is structured, a lot like the one with the investors before, the parents will still own the assets, 100% of the assets. So if the parents needed money in the short run, they could borrow against this property tax-free. Okay? And then when the kids inherited it with a stepped-up basis, they would have plenty of cash when they sold it to pay off the debt, and there'd be no taxes paid at all. And that's a very clever strategy to avoid paying income taxes on property, especially if you've done a number of exchanges over life. So it's something to study. Something to study. And this is just an example. You really get into it, you probably make it a lot more complicated than that. Okay. Well, I am at the end of my book. We have covered every page in the appendix, I think. I'm just going to flip to here to make sure. So I hope you've learned a little bit more about lease options. I know most of you knew something about lease options. I do believe they're one of the more flexible tools in my toolbox. I use them all the time to both buy and sell, and I highly recommend them for you. So study the paperwork. If you have any questions, give me an email at shawrealestate@gmail.com. Happy to answer your questions. You get involved in the middle of a deal and you want to talk about it, shoot me an email and I'll call you if I can. But I do spend a little bit of time overseas, so if I'm not in the country, I'll get to you when I get back as far as the phone call goes. You know, I can email you overseas, but I don't make a lot of phone calls when I'm overseas. So normally different time zone. Well, thank you so much for coming. You guys have been a good audience.